man who made the title what it is today, Bruno Sammartino.
His opponent weighing 236 pounds in the white corner from Van Nuys, California.
Welcome in to another edition of the Retro Wrestling Rewind. As always, I am David Fine from the Retro Wrestling Rewind, and of course, the man to my right, I call him the voice of our generation, the great Tyler Peters. SuperClash 3.
Yes,
it was an amazing show, but what were your thoughts before we get in and start talking about SuperClash 3? And what were your thoughts from this show way back in 1985?
I find all these shows fascinating when we go back and review them. I thought it had a lot of good matches and definitely a lot of great wrestlers, name recognition. But there was also some matches that were unique, and we'll get into that I felt, hey, we could have left them off the card. So it was overall, though, a good show. I've never got to witness or watch a SuperClash show. You know, this was for what it was, still a good show, I thought.
Yeah, if you kind of had to, in a nutshell, what would you think your favorite match of that? We were talking about it off air. What do you think your favorite your favorite match of the show was?
It would have to be Jerry the King Lawler taking on Kerry Von Erich. I believe both titles. Lawler was AWA World Heavyweight Champion. You had, of course, Kerry Von Erich representing world-class championship wrestling, being their champion. And I thought that was just a great match. The psychology, the storytelling, and I know we'll get into that, but that's my favorite, I think.
Yeah, the first match that we had up was Chavo, Mondo, and Hector Guerrero, of course, the Guerrero brothers. They're legends in the business.
Oh, they are.
Taking on Cactus Jack in the Rock and Roll RPMs. It's Mike Davis and Tommy Lane. It's a six-man tag. Cactus Jack, that man was wrestling back. This show was so many years ago, but he was wrestling and he was good.
Oh, he was awesome. People forget even back then, and you're talking about, he was still taking those dangerous bumps. It wasn't new. What the Hell in a Cell matches that we saw later with The Undertaker, you were seeing him do that in a six-man tag against the Guerreros, and he took that big back body drop and hit that concrete floor. He loved it. Foley loved the stiffness. And what I took away about the Guerreros is I could see and tell why Eddie was so great. He was that good, that talented in the ring. The way the Guerreros could move in the ring, they could also work down on the mat, keep you grounded. One spot that I noticed, David, that I enjoyed was, I believe one of the brothers had held up in a move where the other one did the leg scissors because it was going so fast. As I was taking my notes, I was trying to remember which Guerrero it was. They were just that good, though. It was exciting, a fun match to watch. And that's my takeaways from it, is that the Guerreros were put on a wrestling clinic. And to see Cactus Jack, I love the RPMs, a classic kind of Southern tag team, but right up our alleys, man. It was awesome.
It's funny. Okay, Guerrero brothers, they're known for a lot of things, but did you know that Hector Guerrero, who he was back in Jim Crockett Promotions?
I am not sure. You'll have to educate me. I got to admit.
He was, remember Lasertron?
I need to go look him up, though.
He was a futuristic wrestler who wore a mask, and he had one of those. Remember back to your research? I know you're young, but back in the old Nintendo days, it had the Super Duck Hunt, like one of those guns that for a duck hunt. He had that in like a holster. He was, he was pretty good. But of course he tagged with Jimmy Valiant. So we won't hold that against him. But the Guerrero brothers, Cactus Jack, I cannot believe he is still doing bumps. I think that man would still do those bumps if he was allowed to. But I just do not think that he could take it at his age without really being injured. Don't you think?
Yeah, that may be kind of the fear now, but I wouldn't put it past him to still want to do it, to your point, because, Mick Foley is just fearless. Everybody that works with him will say, Mick, you sure you want to do this when laying out the matches? And he's like, no, let's go for it, man. Even take it to an extreme. didn't matter if he's in Japan, he's in world class WCW, WWE, as we mentioned, with the Hell in a Cell matches, all the special stipulations. The guy just would just take it to a whole nother level, and he had a whole nother gear he could go, but he earned the respect of people, whether it was their style or not. It was, I guess, more of the hardcore variety. And that's what I respect about Mick Foley, Cactus Jack, whether he's Dude Love or Mankind, whatever gimmick.
And I think I've spoken about this in the past. I mean, I sat down and talked with him at WrestleMania when it was back in New York and New Jersey at WrestleCon.
Oh, cool.
And I got him to sign a picture of me. This was back when I first started ring announcing back in 1993. Of course, we know you're the current ring announcer and hype guy, as I would call it, for Coastal Championship Wrestling when they visit Nashville, which of course, hopefully you can talk about that coming up soon, because I think they have an event coming up soon. But
big show.
This man has taken so many chair bumps, and I think this is a shoot. He remembered the date and the time and where this picture took place. I could barely remember, and I haven't been hitting upside the head with chairs, but this man is amazing, and he definitely is a legend. But speaking of legends, a man who was really young in his career, our next match was Eric Embry taking on Double J, Jeff Jarrett. That's JEFF, JARRETT, for the WCWA World Light Heavyweight Championship. This card combined World Class Championship Wrestling, AWA, a Global Wrestling Federation. I mean, a lot of
CWA,
a lot of promotions. What were your thoughts on Jeff Jarrett back then? I mean, we'll kind of get into. I want to ask, which incarnation of Jeff Jarrett did you like? I mean, did you like this one? Did you like when he was, playing the guitar in the WWF? When he was in WCW? I mean, which incarnation of Double J was your favorite?
That's a tough one there, David, because I enjoyed a lot of Jeff Jarrett's work. Of course, being in Tennessee, the Memphis, Nashville, the whole Tennessee territory. I mean, the Jarretts, who hasn't heard of them, and Lawler, but Jeff Jarrett, this may be one of my favorites, even though I thought his gimmick, being a country music singer, and they did that business with Road Dogg later on, and even the Slap Nuts gimmick with Russo and WCW. But this really showed you how fast he could be and how he could work. He was doing, to me, more high-risk moves than I've ever seen in a lot of his matches. And I don't know if this was right when he started, but I would think not too far after. And you could already see how good he was in the ring. And Ethan Embry, I want to give him a lot of credit, because it looks like their styles really mesh well and they worked well together. And that's what I took away as well, that I didn't want to get just fixated on Jeff Jarrett, because it takes two to tango. And what a great opponent. And he won the lightweight title back, because I guess they were kind of switching back and forth from what I can gather. I may be wrong on that.
But no, I mean, I love going back to these old shows that, I mean, to be honest with you, I did not see it on the network. I don't think it was on the network side. That's the one good thing. I've always said that doing a radio show or podcast in 2021, I can't believe we're in the new year. Hopefully, it'll be a great year for all of our listeners or viewers, and of course, you at the house in Tennessee. I know you're a Tennessee fan.
Oh, thank you. Gosh,
and I know that Mike's not here tonight due to he wanted to spend some time with his daughter watching the national championship game with the Ohio State taking on Alabama.
Yeah.
So we wish the Ohio State I'm not biased, but I'm not a fan of Alabama. I hope they lose, and we'll see maybe by the end of this live broadcast, which folks is going to be going on for a while, because of course right now we're talking about SuperClash 3, but coming up in our next segment at the top of the 11 o'clock hour, we are going to be bringing on some of the greatest and the best customizers and collectors of LJN wrestling figures. I mean, we have a guy named Brutus Valentine. He's the creator of the LJN. It's an LJN book. It's based out of Australia, but they're selling them here in the United States. It's like $51, but it tells a history, gives everything about LJNs. We got a guy coming on who started a great LJN figure Facebook group. His name's Johnny Boxer. He's going to be coming on. We're going to be having some some other people. We have Zaash Mann coming all the way from Australia. We got an international presence here on this show, and of course we have the great Tyler Peters. Hopefully he'll be sticking around talking wrestling figures, or as my wife would call them.
Absolutely, yeah.
My wife calls them wrestling figurines, which is an insult. But I've heard that term, and we have Jerry Monroe. He is, to be honest with you, probably the greatest customizer that I've ever seen. He not only does wrestling custom figures, but he has clients, some officials in the law enforcement that a guy, I don't know his name. I wouldn't give it to him on air anyway, but he has this obsession. This one guy has an obsession with crime scenes, like old crime scenes, like from the past, like Charles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer. He got him to recreate that entire, like Jeffrey Dahmer, Charles Manson kind of scenes as figures. It's very fascinating. But tonight we'll be talking about LJN. So, folks, if you're watching this, and you want to come on and talk LJNs, just shoot me an email. The email address is the retro wrestling rewind at gmail.com. We'll talk to you and we'll give you the link, and maybe you can show up on the show coming up next. But we have speaking of shows, I admit that in the past we have done some shows that we've done in the past, like, as I say, before Tyler. That's what I call my life before Tyler. We did shows, and we've done shows double. So I've decided, hey, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna look up every show that we've done. So the next couple of shows we have coming up after this, we have Starrcade 91, Clash of the Champions, Seasons Beatings, WrestleMania, SummerSlam 1990, and Clash of the Champions. That would be 21. That's the next 5 shows. It's going to lead us up to the century mark, the 100th show of the Retro Wrestling Rewind. It's going to be coming up in about 15 weeks or so. I mean, as long as we don't take any time off, and but hopefully Mike will be back next week after the Ohio State wins, and
I don't blame him. Yeah, I mean, got to enjoy some family time.
I mean, I guess if Tennessee was ever in the national championship, you'd be like,
I may be on the show. Yeah.
I also wanted to point out your T-shirt there you're wearing. You got it for Christmas.
Yeah.
I heard you're a Jim Cornette guy. Is that true?
I sure am. A huge fan of Jim Cornette. Definitely a Jim Cornette guy. I just don't have the racket, but he deserves that, because I couldn't do it justice like Mr. Cornette himself, a legend.
Yeah, and speaking of things that are going to be new here in the new year in 2021 in January and going on, and I'm sure Mike can read because he's in education, so he's a smart guy. And I know you are, even though you live in Tennessee. I'm just saying. But we're starting I call it the Retro Wrestling Rewind Book Club. The first book up is called Lance by Chance. It's a great book. It's called Lance by Chance, Wrestling as a Von Erich. If you don't know the whole backstory to Lance Von Erich, it's a very controversial one. Just pick up the book. I got this with the author Vinny Berry. He's going to be coming up on the program, and I'm going to have a link to buy this book. Oh, cool. And then, of course, the book another book I'm reading. I know this is kind of odd. I'm reading 2 books at one time. Killing the Business, the Young Bucks. This is a good book. I would have bought the audio version, but it was not read by the Young Bucks. So I decided I'd pick up the hard copy and read it. I'm reading a couple other books, but those are the 2 books on our Retro Wrestling Rewind.
It's always good to read, though, and even wrestling books. Like I've read a few, but I definitely want to open up my the variety of what kind of books I have. And
does Jim Cornette have a book?
He does, and I've not got a chance to read. I think even if he doesn't, he's probably got books on like territory wrestling. I mean, the guy's a library to himself. So.
I mean, have you seen some of those things on YouTube on his page? Or he in the Castle Corner, I think he calls it Castle Cornette. He has like a whole like secret area, like behind a door, a secret door that has his vault. Like, if this man is a walking encyclopedia of professional wrestling.
Oh, he is, no doubt.
I mean, it's amazing. But you know what's also amazing? I cannot believe that Jimmy Valiant is on the show. The great Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant, taking on Wayne Bloom. What were your thoughts on this third match of SuperClash 3?
Well, I was talking to you, David, before we went on air, and one of the shortest matches I've seen. Definitely the way they laid it out. I'll just say this: Boogie Woogie Man Jimmy Valiant, for what you want to say. I know some people are not fans of him, but he did have charisma, and him kissing Bill after was something. Now, I don't know how that wouldn't work today. Obviously, I'm not sure, but that was what I took away. I actually got to see him. I can't remember the opponent in East Tennessee, where I grew up at an armory. It had the Rock and Roll Express too, and man, from the old ladies to even the young ladies were going crazy over the Boogie Woogie, man. I couldn't believe the reaction, but he definitely had charisma. And what was it, a flying elbow and an elbow after that, after Wayne Bloom attacked him from behind, and 1, 2, 3, we're done to the finish line. So it didn't take real long.
Yeah, I mean, Boogie Woogie, man, I mean, he's definitely a special talent. I mean, he's not for everybody. I mean, he's an acquired taste, but I mean, for a lot of people, it works.
I
mean, I do think that his gimmick, his shtick, like a bunch of other wrestlers back in the 80s, their shtick would not work. It would not be, as they call, politically correct now. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was a bunch of wrestlers who would say, "Oh, I slapped around my girlfriend," stuff like that. I mean, stuff that you would not say now. I mean, it's kind of like I mentioned last week. I think it was last week. The territories and the promotions having these different gimmicks of there was a wrestler in Glow called the Terrorist. I mean, stuff like that. I mean, would not fly right now. I mean, it was great back then. Back in the day, most of the stuff, because people didn't have access to information. It's kind of like, I'm not going to talk political, but it's kind of like with the president. I mean, I think things would have been a whole lot different than they are currently in this country with him if there was not social media. I mean, I think wrestlers back then, if they had had social media, it probably would not have been the same as back. They wouldn't have said as much as they did, because they knew that if someone was going to complain about you or a promotion or whatever, they had to write in. They had to, get out a piece of paper, put a stamp on and put it in the mail, and hopefully that it got there in like a week or two. But now, there's instant stuff on social media. Like whenever you got attacked in the ring, no part of yours, the last time that Coastal Championship Wrestling was in Nashville, I mean, people were reacting, online and on the web and on Twitter. But back then, if it had happened like back at the Armory, like you said, when you saw Jimmy Valiant, no one would have known about it. I mean,
no.
I mean, there's just the people that would have known about whatever incident would have to be there. But now everything is on social media. I mean, do you think that's good or bad?
I think it works both ways. Sometimes it can be good, but most times than not, it's very negative because there's not kayfabe anymore. It's kind of been exposed, and that's a real shame, because that's when wrestling was at its best, when you didn't know what's going on. You didn't get the inside. And of course, unfortunately, there's so much of that information, like you pointed out, with social media, just the web in general, that it's hard to, keep that kind of attitude, that kind of secrets anymore. And, but that's the thing. I mean, with all due respect to Vince McMahon, he did that though. He started coming out because that's a way to attract families. I mean, I get why he did it, but in a way it did hurt things, because now people go, oh yeah, we know that now. They've exposed that, or formula. I mean, it kind of goes back. I don't know if you saw the Dark Side of the Ring, where David Schultz talked about that too. I guess he didn't fit into what their vision was. And after he slapped Stossel and that whole incident, and then Mr. T, supposedly they got into it. And it was unfortunate, because I could see both sides of it. And I mean, I'm a big David Schultz fan. I mean, another Tennessee guy. What can I say? I'm partial, Dr. D.
Yeah. So. I mean, it was definitely a weird time, but the next match, next match we had, easy for me to see. Next match we had was Iceman King Parsons. He was the current WCWA Texas Heavyweight Champion, taking on Brickhouse Brown. I loved watching Iceman King Parsons back, and in World Class. I mean, he was just different. I mean, what were your thoughts on this match?
Well, I thought it was actually a very good match. Brickhouse Brown had that prototypical look, like I think Vince would have liked, the bodybuilder, but he was a great athlete. And Iceman Parsons had the charisma. He could talk, but he could go in the ring. And this made for a great dynamic between the two. And I really enjoyed it. And what I missed David, about finishes, and not that you want to overdo them now, but the foreign object. They used that really well back in this time period and timeline and era, however you want to frame it, back in professional wrestling. And that's what I took away. Parsons was obviously the heel, I guess, or turning that way against Brickhouse Brown. But the way Brickhouse could get up, I mean, people were not seeing a lot of drop kicks. That was even innovative for back then. That's what we have to remember, how much the movesets have even changed.
Yeah, I mean, I think nowadays they have a lot of high flyers. I mean,
oh, they do a lot,
which is great. I mean, like, the current TNT champion, Darby Allin. I mean, his moves are just, I mean.
Oh, he's great. I enjoy Darby Allin. I mean, he's unique and unorthodox, but I'm with you. He's fun to watch and a very interesting personality, what he does, but it adds to his character, his gimmick. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely good on that. And speaking of that, I mean, people hear you and watch you here each and every week on the Retro Wrestling Rewind, but how can they, hear you, watch you, and read your amazing stuff? I mean, how can they find you on social media? What other websites, what other networks are you on currently?
I'm on Twitter. You can find me at Dustin Tyler 86, and then Instagram DD Peters 86. And for wrestling articles, that I have a wonderful opportunity, very blessed in that regard, to write for a awesome website with other great wrestling writers, sports writers, what have you. A little bit of everything is whatthebuzz.com. And sometimes it'll be simply The Buzz. You can find them on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. But they're doing a lot of great stuff. We're growing, and it has just been fun to keep up with a lot of the daily wrestling news and the big stories, and kind of put a little bit of my opinion mixed in. So just kind of some plugs there, but I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity and time to do that, David. It means a lot.
And I saw the other podcast you're on. You have some big guests coming up. I mean, Nikita Koloff.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, we've got Nikita Koloff coming on in early February on the Rewind Wrestling Radio podcast, because it also has Rewind in it. So I've got a lot of them, a couple. That's what, kind of laughing about. Not a knock against either program, but there's some rewinds in there. But yeah, Nikita Koloff, PCO, who was in Ring of Honor, been in WCW and in WWE. So that's a big one too. And a lot of other guests. So yeah, we'd appreciate it if you subscribe to our network. That's once again, the Rewind Wrestling Radio Network podcast. We're on YouTube and also through Anchor, a lot of the platforms. We'll have links to that. So please go check us out. We appreciate that.
Yeah. And Nikita Koloff, he is the ultimate person who lived his gimmick.
He did.
He changed his legal name to Nikita Koloff. I mean, who does that? I mean, I to be honest with you, I don't think there are any wrestlers who had a gimmick name that I can remember that changed their legal name to whatever their wrestling gimmick name was. I mean, he lived the life, and he lived the gimmick. And PCO, he's a good guy. He's been on the program before, and I actually texted him earlier today, and I said, "Hey, I heard you going on a radio show," and I said, "Hey, you gonna come on here?" He hasn't messaged me back, but he's also another person who lives the gimmick. Every time I text him, he's like, "Oh, whoever his handler is in Ring of Honor." I'm like, "Oh my God!" That's the one thing I like about being friends with wrestlers. But then there's other things, it's like they don't ever get out of their gimmick. I mean, like a Nikita Koloff. Great wrestler, great guy, is found the Lord. He's really into that, which is great, but he never is out of his gimmick.
No, I mean, seeing that's something, going back to kayfabe. I mean, I know things are different. I don't mean to harp on this, but that's the thing. The wrestlers live those gimmicks, at least a lot of them. I mean, Roddy Piper was one of those guys that came from old school. Now he transitioned to the WrestleManias, the Cyndi Lauper moments, which was cool, the MTV deal with WWF at the time. But you think about him in Mid-Atlantic and NWA and his friendships with Flair and Dusty, and then even in WCW coming back, it was, regardless of where he was at, he was just a major name and somebody I miss still. But he regarded the business. I mean, people were like, you couldn't go against him as far as the kayfabe and that old school way of thinking, because he was brought up. A lot of these men and women were brought up that way. That's just, you have to respect that and admire that, and that's what I do when it comes to a lot of these wrestlers.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I mean, it kind of to harp in the past. Of course, we talk about the past, so of course we have to harp on it. I mean, the kayfabe. I mean,
Yes.
like a heel team, they could. I mean, this person could be the nicest guy in the whole of history of the world, but he lived the gimmick. I mean, he would never want to be seen with, you know, a baby face or a guy he's supposed to be, you know, going against, even if they're like best friends and they're road buddies, they ride in the same car. They cannot. I mean, because fans. I mean, I remember when, I think it was when Sergeant Slaughter turned on America and went to you know, Iraq and did all
Yeah,
that
I remember
stuff.
that.
I mean,
With Hogan, yeah.
the fans, I mean, they were livid. I mean, I don't think fans, they're not as, I mean, not gullible, but since there's no real kayfabe and there's the internet, I mean, you can Google somebody and find out what their real name is, where they wrestled. But back then you couldn't. So if a guy
Right.
was a Russian, or maybe say like the Iron Sheik, could be the nicest guy in the world, but people hated him because they did not know that was just a gimmick, that he was really not like that, or whoever it was. And I think that made the events and the fans love it even more.
Yeah, it made it believable. It made it credible. It made the fans, like you say, buy into it. And the thing is, I've heard a lot of stories of the old time promoters, and I know things change. You know, you got to have a little new school every now and then. But Bill Watts, you know, going back to the Cowboy Bill Watts, I've heard JR talk about it. Jim Ross, for those who don't know, a lot of people will from the audience here that loves wrestling, but he would, I think, hand out fines, or you would get in trouble, maybe to not that extreme, excuse me, having some trouble there. But if, you know, the heels and baby faces were called together, I mean, even locker rooms were separate, is what I was getting at. It was so good that I had to really get in thought and hopefully get my words out. So.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely a different time. I mean, it's a good time, but it was a different time. It was definitely, I mean, there's a lot of great things about wrestling now. I mean, there's a lot of bad things about wrestling now. I mean, not wrestling without an audience. And I think, to be honest with you, I think AEW's done a better job doing it without a crowd. I mean, the WWE has the WWE Universe, you know,
That Thunderdome,
the Thunderdome, which is great and everything, but having fans in the stands, even if it's only 600 people scattered about, you know, social distancing, it still gives an ambiance and makes the wrestlers, I think, kind of up their game.
It does. I mean, they've got their cheering section out there with the wrestlers kind of acting as fans. And you know what? I'm a fan of both of it. Both companies are going to have naturally a different presentation. I mean, you watch an Impact Wrestling, New Japan, it doesn't matter. A lot of the overseas promotions as well. But AEW, I've been drawn to them. Now, I can see the critiques on them, but there's also a lot of positives. But I can also see that with WWE too. So I tend to be drawn and invested and intrigued a lot of times by Wednesday Night Dynamite and what's going on there, especially with this whole Omega Bullet Club thing with Don Callis. It's something that's kind of drawn me in, whether it's fair or not, and whether people like it or not.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to another old school thing. I mean, back in the day, you would see, say, Ric Flair wrestle on TBS, you know, on the NWA World Championship Wrestling. Then you would see him down in Florida on their TV. That's kind of, I think, how they're trying to treat the whole AEW, TNA or Impact kind of crossover. I mean, the Good Brothers came on, like you said, on AEW, and they kind of reformed the Bullet Club, or they didn't really call it that, but you know, something like that. I like that. I mean, I like it when two companies can come together and kind of do crossovers. I mean, it can only help Impact Wrestling and All Elite Wrestling.
Absolutely. I think that's what it's for. It's to help booster each brand, whether ratings or for talent or for both. Nothing wrong with that. It's, I think, good business. I believe, it's kind of going back, like you said, Flair was traveling, had to defend the title in all the territories. And even if you weren't a champion, a lot of wrestlers would still do that. And I kind of see that comparison in a way. And it's fitting. We're talking about how modern day wrestling's doing that when SuperClash was pretty much that. I mean, it was really a cross promotion in a lot of ways.
I mean, it was. I mean, there was a lot. I mean, there was a lot of co-mingling. It was a lot of. Yeah, it was. It was good.
Yeah.
I mean, it was good. But the next match we had on the card was a mixed tag. It was Wendy Richter, the Top Guns, was Ricky Rice and Derek Dukes, taking on Bad Company, Paul Diamond, Pat Tanaka, with Medusa Michelli and DDP. I mean, who would have thought he would become WCW World Champion and just kind of like transform people back? I mean, back here at the show. I mean, what was your thoughts on this intergender match?
I really enjoyed Wendy Richter and Medusa. It's wild to see them both during this time period because I know they both went on to have a lot of success. Wendy Richter was first in WWE in that original screw job, Moolah doing that, read a lot about that, saw it. I think it was on Dark Side of the Ring, one of the episodes is how I found out about it. But seeing Medusa, she is awesome. I mean, you could tell right away she had it. She had the talent. She could go. And she was great as a heel. I mean, she antagonized Richter to come over there. I mean, and there was so much action that it started off in a brawl, which went bad because it seemed controlled. And DDP, you're right. He could talk. He was stood out. He was insulting the crowd. He was getting that heat. And you could tell right away whether manager or wrestler, this guy was going to be determined to succeed. And he did. He achieved that in WCW and found some success in WWE in the evasion angle. We covered that with Mike on an earlier episode.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has he's definitely found his way. I mean, I mean, if anybody's not done DDP yoga, I mean, definitely log on to this website and to the Facebook page and order it. It's hard. I mean, I will not lie to you. I've done it a couple of times. Did it in person one time, and it's hard, but it'll get you into shape. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely different than he was back in the day. But this next match, Greg Gagne taking on Ronnie Garvin for the AWA. It's for the vacant AWA International TV Championship. I mean, there were so many belts and championships and co-mingling on this show. I mean, what were your thoughts on this match?
I thought this was a good match due to having Ronnie Garvin and you had Greg Gagne. I mean, you say what you want to about Greg, but second generation, Vern Gagne is his father. He's trained by him, and Greg could work the mat or even go quick if he needed to. And Ronnie Garvin was just that tough guy. He was solid. He was built of rock, and he had those hands of stone. And it didn't matter who his opponent was. He lived up to that gimmick because he was going to hit you. I mean, you better get ready because Ronnie Garvin's coming at you. I love hearing Arn Anderson. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to his podcast, but he talked about how tough and how much of a real man Ronnie Garvin is. He said one time he had him in a hold, and he's like, it did all I could to get out of it, but I wasn't going anywhere. That's to the credit of just how good Ronnie Garvin was. And I mean, if it's coming from Arn Anderson, the enforcer, then it's on the money.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I mean, he's had some great. I was not a fan when he won the world title, but I mean, what were your thoughts on him winning the title, the big gold belt from Ric Flair?
I think it was unfair. It was just timing. I mean, I get people's criticisms of it because, you had Ric Flair, who was just always been this great champion, and Ronnie Garvin could be a champion, but I just think it's due to that. Just simply the timing of it, the way maybe it was booked, just things didn't work in his favor. And whether fair or not, Ronnie Garvin got all the respect in the world for him, but he was in a bad spot and bad position because, I mean, that's Ric Flair we're talking about, the Nature Boys. So it was just quite a predicament. It's all I could kind of take away from it.
Yeah, coming up in the next couple of weeks, like I said, we've got many different shows. We got In Your House 7, In Your House 24. We have Clash of the Champions 33. I'm terrible with number. Uncensored from 1995. Super Brawl number 11. It was called Revenge. Survivor Series 1989. Survivor Series 1988. And to round out that event, we have Halloween Havoc 1990. I mean,
Awesome. There was so many. That's what I was going to say. Let you read those off. That I don't blame you. I can write this stuff down, try to memorize it. I still have a hard time remembering all this stuff.
And I was talking to Mike this afternoon before he was starting to watch the debacle of the national championship in Miami. The Ohio State take. I'm sorry, I hate Alabama. I mean, I'm not really a college football fan. I mean, I did go to a lot of University of Georgia football games back in the mid '80s with my parents because they had season tickets. But Alabama, they win everything. I mean, I just don't understand why they are so good. Do you think it's because of the coaching, or do you think it's because of the actual players?
It's a combination, both great coaching and the players. They're just like a college football game. It's hard to stop. Just press X or whatever the button you need to. The guys go out and catch it. They can run. And but yeah, to Mike's defense, Ohio State, not a big fan of either team. He definitely gives me some nice insults on Tennessee basketball. So I appreciate that. They graduated to varsity, Mike, to your comment. I appreciate it, buddy, on Facebook. But no, Alabama's kind of and Ohio State are kind of those hills that we don't like, but they're good. You want to use wrestling terminology.
And speaking of something that was not good, but it had a great name, the Street Fight Lingerie Battle Royale. The Syrian Terrorist taking on Bambi, Peggy Lee Leather, Lori Lynn, Brandy May, Malibu. That's a great name for a wrestler, for a woman. Nina.
Why not?
Okay, Pocahontas and Luna Vachon. Okay, so that's another gimmick that they would not be able to get away with. Pocahontas. I mean, come on. I mean, if they weren't inadvertently making fun of like Native Americans and Indians, I mean, come on. Seriously. I mean,
you couldn't get away with none of this stuff now. It's amazing what they could get away with.
The Syrian Terrorist. Really? I mean, come on. Who was booking this shit? It was obviously not Dusty Rhodes. It was probably
it wasn't Dusty.
Greg Gagne. I would assume it was Greg Gagne. I mean, what are your nice thoughts on the Lingerie Street Battle Royal that was won by the Syrian Terrorist?
I've got to have nice thoughts on this. No, I mean, there was some okay moments. Now, this is definitely not going to go down as one of the greatest matches ever. This was kind of a cluster. It's all over the place. Hard to keep up in any battle royals or Royal Rumbles, to be fair to all these women involved. But I mean, I don't know if they were going for the male demographic even back in the 80s, because you saw the nylons was one line, Lee Marshall or Ray Stevens or Vern, whoever was calling this thing at the time, because they kind of switched Stevens and Vern out at different matches. But to me, the only big recognizable names I remember is Luna Vachon and then Medusa. And to me, why not have them wrestle? Or I know Medusa's already wrestled. Just have Luna Vachon get one of these PAL girls or the PAL champion and squash her, because she deserves that. I mean, being a Vachon, one of the toughest families going back to AWA or all the territories that her father's wrestled, and Luna was great. I loved her gimmick, but she had a lot of believability because a lot of that was her. That was her personality, and that was cool. I mean, that's the thing I took away. I was just waiting for mud to fall out of the sky. Let's just make it a mud fight or something. Of course, that may be scary. Yeah.
I mean, especially with some of anyway. But it's one of those things. It's like back then, female women's wrestling was a joke. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, they had Glow, the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, was a bunch of actresses, not really wrestlers. I mean, I think it was more of a sideshow than serious. I mean, but nowadays, I mean, they have their own pay-per-view. They have a women's champion. They have the tag team champions. Hell, they made Tessa Blanchard the Impact champion. I mean, they made a woman the Impact World Champion. You would have never seen that back in the 80s, early 90s. I mean, I think women's wrestling has come a long way. It's not, I'll be honest with you, back whenever you'd see like the women's lingerie, panties on a pole match, that Jerry the King Lawler loved, it was hey, I got to go use a bathroom or go get something to eat at the refrigerator if you're watching on pay-per-view. But now some of those matches are actually better than the male matches.
They are. I mean, women's wrestling, if it, depending on who it is, like if it's Charlotte or Asuka nowadays, or if Becky, I know she just had a kid, so she's not back yet, or we get, Bianca Belair. I'm thinking of some of the WWE stars, and Serena D, the NWA champion now in AEW, and then Thunder Rosa, Tay Conti. Some of the use those examples are really good. But I'll tell you, yeah, it was a shame because you had Wendy Richter that was kind of could have been at the forefront of a women's revolution. She was definitely there with the 80s connection, with the rock and wrestling connection, with all the WrestleManias. It was a shame what happened to her with Moolah, with all due respect to all parties involved with that ordeal. And you saw Medusa, that's another one. Even in WWF, when she was Alundra Blaze, I mean, she had some good matches. She could really work, and she was another one of those forerunners for the women's division. But now we're seeing a lot more innovation like we are with the men, and I think that's what's changing. And it's a changing of the guard because the women are like, we've had enough of it. We're tired of just being these sex symbols. We're actually athletes, and we can wrestle, by golly, without going too far there. There's me trying to be like Andy Griffith or something there. I don't know what I was going for there, but it was some, great matches. I mean, think about the WrestleMania, the triple threat with Rousey. I mean, add her to that list. My goodness, they tore the house down. They did better than the men. I mean, they outdraw them, not just on looks, but their talent, for crying out loud.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's definitely come a long way.
It has.
The next match number 8, had had Sergeant Slaughter, and I call him the ultimate heel back in the 80s, Colonel De Beers.
Oh, he was great.
DDP in a boot camp match. What were your thoughts on this boot camp match between Sergeant Slaughter, who was, I think back then was G.I. Joe Sergeant Slaughter, taking on Colonel De Beers?
I like this match. I thought it was great back and forth. I love the cannon clothesline that Sarge had. And Colonel De Beers was physical. I mean, this whole match was intense. It was a great feud, great rivalry. And DDP was in that. I didn't realize he was with De Beers, but also he grabbed the mic. It's always golden with Paige. He could talk even before he started working in wrestling. You could see the potential there. You forget how underrated he was and valued as a manager at that point in time. But they went back and forth, the Army helmet, the weapons, and then we get the Iron Sheik and Casey getting involved, and then the Guerreros come out and help him. Then Sergeant Slaughter and Colonel De Beers brawl on the outside. That's what I loved. Even with interview segments going back to Gagne and Ronnie Garvin. I mean, Ronnie Garvin still wanted to fight. And Greg's like, anytime. That's what's missing. I mean, I know things change, but there's so much great stuff from back in the 80s in those days.
Yeah, I mean, it's so many great things. I mean, and kind of just talking about what's coming up in our next segment at the top of the hour. It's about 17 minutes until the top of the 11 o'clock hour. That would be 10 o'clock your time. And we're going to be having some talk about wrestling figures. Not just, I mean, these guys that we're going to have on the program, and hopefully Tyler will get to stick around for a little bit talking wrestling figures. They are some of the greatest collectors in the history of collecting. I mean, we have 2 guys coming in all the way from Australia. That's right. It is tomorrow, but they're going to be coming on today. We're going to be having Johnny Boxer all the way from from Florida. He started an LJN, probably the premier LJN Facebook page, which I've met a couple of these guys on. That's how they're on tonight. We have Nick Bartley. He is the host of Hunting Nostalgia, and then tonight, and I just found out via text message, he signed a big deal with a local TV network up in his area in Pennsylvania. So we're going to be talking about that. He loves wrestling figures. He collects wrestling figures. It's going to be amazing. We're going to have Zaash Mann on. We're going to have Brutus Valentine. He's the creator of what I consider the LJN Bible.
Okay.
And if you want to know about LJN figures and all the accessories and buy his book. We'll be having a link, of course, on the show notes on the audio version and, of course, the video version. And, of course, I cannot leave off probably the greatest, in my opinion, and, of course, my opinion is flawed. I used to like Donald Trump, but I don't anymore. He should not be in the Hall of Fame. According to Mick Foley, he should not be in the Hall of Fame, but maybe he'll get voted and impeached in that, but we're not going to be talking about politics. The great Jerry Monroe is going to be coming on at the top of the hour, but to keep on with this match this evening, SuperClash 3, the Samoan SWAT team Samu Fatu with Buddy Roberts, of course, of the Freebirds, taking on Michael Hayes and Steve Cox. It was a tag team match for the WCWA World Tag Team titles.
Yeah, I thought it was another good match. Samoan SWAT teams, another team. You know, we talked about top tag teams with Mike. They're underrated. I wish I could have found if we had 20 or 30 top tag teams, because they deserve to probably be close to that top 10, if not in it. They were unbelievable because they were these big monster heels that would just come in. They could work, but they could also sell. And I thought, I don't know what your opinion is. I would love to hear it. I thought the air in the whole building picked up when Michael P.S. Hayes. There's something about Bad Street, Atlanta, GA that gets me pumped up. And I'm not even from Atlanta, but I love those old 80s themes. I mean, him singing it, the Freebirds, Charisma. I mean, what's your thoughts? I mean, that was so cool because you're an Atlanta guy. So.
No, I mean, like I've told you and Mike before, and for some reason you don't agree with me, which is fine. Some of the music on the WWE network has changed to like generic, like you just like, tap your foot music. And I do think that, at least from my opinion, that the music of like the Road Warriors, the Jimmy Garvin, Sharp Dressed Man with We Will Rock You, Manny Fernandez and Rick Rude. I mean, that, because they would the Road Warriors and Manny Fernandez and Rick Rude, they would finish their match. They would beat the shit out of the jobbers, the enhancement talent, before their music even stopped. I mean, before their music was even over. But what is your opinion? I know it's not a big deal to you, but for a guy who's been watching wrestling since 1983, it's a big deal for me. And that's why sometimes if you go to YouTube, they have the original music.
Yeah, that's what I like about YouTube and WWE Networks. Obviously, probably for copyrights, those purposes maybe. But yeah, it takes away from it. I mean, you got to have some Bad Street, man. And the thing going back to this match is what was unique is I didn't know that Buddy Roberts and Michael P.S. Hayes were at odds. I mean, to see Roberts on opposing sides here was something fascinating because you always saw them together. Thinking about speaking of the Von Erichs, those classic battles they had. And the Sportatorium in Dallas were just legendary. But the Samoan SWAT team was great. I thought, Cox was a good worker. He had that look as well, going back to Brickhouse Brown. I mean, I could see him working in a lot of big promotions, but that was, to be honest, the only time I'd heard of him. But he worked on the arm. I thought it was a couple spots in there. Hayes, again, I think it was one of the Samoan SWAT team. May have been Rikishi, actually, who later became that. Out of that tag team, got him in that lower area, let's just say that, with the ring rope. And then when Michael P.S. Hayes came in, it's like that intensity. He can match it with those guys. And the energy level, once again, comes up because he just had that charisma. I mean, Hayes, I heard Bruce Pritchard say that if you want to learn how to cut a promo, Michael Hayes, just go to his school and listen. Just shut up and listen to what he'll tell you.
Yeah, and the next, I mean, I love Michael P.S. Hayes. I mean,
he's great.
His gimmick,
yeah, absolutely,
24
of the best. Yeah,
but the next match, which surprisingly enough was only the second gimmick, well, actually the third gimmick match. It was an Indian strap match. Manny Fernandez taking on Wahoo McDaniel. I mean, what were your thoughts on this match?
I loved it. I mean, the Indian strap match was definitely down Wahoo's alley. It was a specialty of his. You could tell. Manny the Bull Fernandez, to me, does not get enough credit as far as being a great worker, a great personality. To me, this generation and eras where fans really disliked the heels, the bad guys, they believe they bought in, and you don't see that. It's too much going through the motions now. That's when I go back and review these shows, see clips or certain segments of matches, and they were hitting each other. It was brutal. I mean, we saw color from both guys. I mean, they were going for it with this four corners. It really told a unique story with any kind of stipulation with these Indian strap match type deals.
Yeah, I think back then, I mean, unless you were a major star like a Ric Flair, I mean, you didn't have to have a solid contract. You wrestled everywhere, so it didn't really matter if you pissed somebody off or did something. You could go maybe travel. If you were in Georgia, you could travel to Alabama. You could travel.
Yeah, you could.
And make some one-off cash. And I think nowadays people are just so terrified of if I screw up, if I piss the wrong person off, or you do something to somebody who would tell somebody you're not going to be working anymore. And then there are not many promotions now. I mean, there's Ring of Honor, which is coming back. They have MLW, which I mean, I guess is a good promotion. We have the WWE, and then we have AEW. I mean, it's bad when a wrestler would rather stay in NXT, which is not even the developmental promotion anymore, than be brought up to the main roster. I mean, back in the day, people, if they were, in like championship wrestling from Florida, and the big time was, the National Wrestling Alliance, and in Georgia, they wanted to be brought up there. But now NXT is so much better than, I think, the main roster. Don't you think?
They are. I think that's why some of the stars go back down and they thrive. I mean, it just depends. Not for all of them, not for all the men and women wrestlers, but you can see they can have more of their freedom. I mean, still kind of the WWE style, but NXT brings a different atmosphere. That was the whole idea and concept for creating that. Dusty was very instrumental in that. I mean, that's the dichotomy between how Cody and Dustin, or the Young Bucks, it'd be Cody being an MVP of AEW. You think the footprints are all over both these companies competing on Wednesday nights. That's what's so cool to me. I don't really look at the competition anymore, because to me, both shows, I think, have kind of got over that. I mean, they still compete, but it's, we can pay attention to ratings, but as a fan, I'm just loving it, because you get a variety. It's like a good buffet of just great wrestling. I mean, put it like that. As crazy as that sounds, hey, it works. Hey, why not?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it says the buffet. I mean, if you don't like one thing, there's
another. Yeah.
You have choices, and unlike sometimes you don't have choices. But the next match was Jerry Lawler taking on Kerry Von Erich. It was a title unification match for the AWA World Heavyweight Championship versus the World Class Heavyweight title. And this is a big feud. It ended, unfortunately, due to a referee stoppage. But I mean, what were your thoughts on that match?
I was just talking to you before we went on air, David. The psychology, the storytelling in this match, we definitely got color. I love the build-up. I love how Lawler set it up in the interview. Was there not anybody much better? I mean, Flair was up there, but I think Lawler at least was close. I mean, if not right up there. I mean, he was underestimated just how great of a talker Jerry the King Lawler was. And these guys had good back and forth. They needed to be dominant in certain parts of this match to get each other over. And the discus clothesline was interesting from Kerry. That was one of his trademarks. Of course, the punches were so good from Jerry the King Lawler. And the way that Kerry Von Erich sold it, too, made it magical. And I love the fact they had that official from WCCW. I mean, he added to it to make it feel real, like it was a sport. It ain't just a soap opera. I mean, sure, we get a little elements of that sprinkled here and there, but you still viewed it as a sport. That's what we mean. People bought into this stuff. And I think it was just one of my favorite matches. I mean, there was some good stuff, but this is up there for me. I mean, this whole double title deal between Lawler and Kerry Von Erich.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. What did you think of the, we kind of getting to the end of the broadcast. What were your thoughts on the main event for the program?
I thought this was a good match. Now, I think that that should have been the main event, to be honest, with the Lawler, Kerry Von Erich. But I do anytime you get the Rock and Roll Express, you get a monster reaction. The women were loving them, much like Kerry. They were going crazy like they're rock stars. It was truly awesome to watch. And then you had Ron Fuller and Golden. They were a great team. And then Sylvia with a kendo stick. Now, I thought that was Tommy Dreamer had that gimmick, but no, Sylvia, man, she whacked them. I mean, she was not afraid to help her team. And Ron Fuller, that's another great Tennessee family, going back to the Welsh family. They have a great history. They were great big Southern Hills that, they isolated the Rock and Roll Express, but the Rock and Roll Express could move, and they did all what they needed to do. The whole dynamic was always great. This was just a great wrestling match, is my takeaways from it. And Sylvia, going to that point just real quickly, managers or valets, as you want to call them, were not afraid to get involved in matches. That's why I loved Cornette. I loved Heenan. Whether it was the women, Sherry Martel, Sylvia, it didn't matter. They were not afraid to get their hands dirty and interfere. And, with a kendo stick, a slap, maybe doing something underhanded, a shortcut. But that's what you needed to do to get that story over. And I mean, if you're going to be a villain, you got to do that.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of, kind of getting towards the end of this portion of the broadcast, next week we're going to be covering Starrcade 1991 Battle Bowl. What
I
are you
can't
talking-
wait.
I mean, have you seen the show in a while?
I haven't seen it in a while, and I got to tell you, some of these I may be seeing for the first time, but I am looking forward to it. I mean, it's a good chance to go back and see some of these stars maybe earlier in their careers, maybe get to the middle of their careers. So anytime you get a Starrcade, though, that's been kind of the Super Bowl, kind of the answer for NWA, Jim Crockett, and WCW when Turner bought them for Vince McMahon and the WWF then. And, of course, WWE now, they took that F out because of the wildlife deal. So it's funny. That was actually a fun campaign. That's what made me think about it when I said get the F out. That was one of the big smart campaigning things they did there.
I mean, and another thing I'm campaigning is, of course, we got
oh yeah,
Lance by Chance. It's a great book on the story of Lance Von Erich, who was not a Von Erich. So I'm gonna reread that. It's on our Retro Wrestling Rewind book club, and of course I know Nick Bartley is watching, and it's gonna be. If he can read and has time, I think you should watch this or read this. Nick, it's called Lance by Chance. It's a great book by Vinnie Barry. And the other one, before we get to the end of this portion of the broadcast, the Young Bucks, Killing the Business. It's going to be a great read. But of course, we're not done yet. No, folks, we are not done yet. We are coming back on the other side. We're going to play the end promo, and then we got a very special promo of one of the guys who's going to be coming up on the program. Man, I am so happy for him. Got some great news from him today. It's going to be amazing. That's all coming up in just a few minutes right here on the Retro Wrestling Rewind.
38 pounds in the black corner. From St. Louis, Missouri.
Andre the Giant.
Gonna get his legs set on the bruiser.
Number one, the greatest WWE champion of all time, and in many ways, the man who made the title what it is today, Bruno Sammartino.
His opponent weighing 236 pounds in the white corner. From Van Nuys, California.
Remember all the fun and joy of your favorite game or childhood toy. If only you could feel that way again. Well, you don't have to go back in time, 'cause Nick and friends can help you find long lost treasures you once loved. Let's go hunting nostalgia.
Man, welcome back into the Retro Wrestling Rewind. And as you see, we have I got a Murderer's Row gallery of customizers all the way from Australia. The great Zaash Mann, who I think is frozen right now, unless he likes to just sit there with his water bottle. And of course, the man we just saw in this great promo, the great Nick Bartley, the host of Hunting Nostalgia. And in the top right, the man who's in the Witness Protection Program, the great Johnny Boxer. Guys, welcome back into the program. And on this segment of the program, we are talking LJN wrestling figures. And I just wanted to kind of start off with you, Zaash. How did you get into LJNs? And you have a collection, a massive awesome collection behind you. How did you get into it, and did you collect them as a kid?
I got into LJNs probably about 4 to 5 years ago. I randomly picked up a few, reminded me of my childhood, did what so many other people do, and got addicted to it. It took me about a year before I ended up getting any more, but that's where the addiction started. I had to get them all from there.
I mean, growing up as a kid, I mean, what was your favorite? I mean, there's so many LJNs, and we're going to, of course, be talking to the great Brutus Valentine. Going to be coming up in a little bit, and of course, Johnny Boxer. He's the premier. He's got the number one and the original LJN Facebook group. We're going to talk to him about that in a second. What was your your fondest collection memory. I mean, what the first one that you collected? I mean, you're in Australia, so was it easy to get LJNs back in the day? Alrighty.
I'm struggling to hear you,
Oh.
Dave. I think I've got a bad line over here in Australia. It's not coming through that clearly at the moment. I'm hoping it clears up soon. But if you're talking to me, my favourite LJN figure is definitely the original Hogan. It was the first figure I had when I was a kid, and I've kept that sort of nostalgia. And he's always got a special place for me, the old Hogan.
Yeah, and speaking of hunting nostalgia, I mean, Nick, I mean, you texted me this just a couple hours ago. I mean, congratulations. I know you may not want to talk about it, but
oh no, I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
no, first off, hi, and thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, I still have to go to meetings and we have to negotiate and everything. But yeah, this was, I didn't even realize it, but I got set up tonight. I was doing another podcast before this podcast at 7. And it was just with a guy that he asked me to be on his podcast. So I said, sure. And to talk about the show. And I did know that the podcast was for a cable network, our local cable network. But I had no idea the third person that was actually in the group, like this group, was the director of the local channel. I had no idea. And at the end, he said, we want to put your show on our network. And we're going to go have some discussions here this week. And hopefully it'll be, I mean, it's been a long and winding road with this, but I'm very happy that somebody else is going to be filming it because I can't stand doing it. I love doing the show, but I hate everything else. Everything that they're going to be doing, I hate doing.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of LJNs, I mean, in your hunting nostalgia YouTube channel, which is amazing. Of course, we're going to have the link in the show notes right here on the video version, of course, on the audio only version. What have you found any LJNs in the wild, as they would say?
Oh yeah, I found some of the most, not one item. I have thousands and thousands of toys just right here in the Playhouse. And there is not one item that I purchased online, not a single item of everything that I own, because I do not want it to ever end. I don't want the actual hunt for these pieces of nostalgia. I don't want it to end. So I'm not in a race to complete anything, but yeah, I have found some really amazing things in the wild, just, and I've also asked kids that I grew up with if they had any old toys, stuff like that. But yep, Rick Rude, I found in a box, his tattoos rubbed off, but I don't care. I'm not a pristine kind of guy. I let my kids play with everything except for the case is locked up. That is only played with under direct supervision.
Well, I mean, I can understand it. My son loves to play with my LJNs. I mean, I only have a few that, I mean, I had the whole collection, but they were beat to shit. I mean, because to be honest with you, as a kid, before you got smarted and said, hey, I can collect these. I mean, who in this group did not beat the crap out of their LJNs? I mean, the arms are falling off, the legs are, I mean, who would have thought you could restore them like Zaash does? And I'm going to bring in another guy on this program, Johnny Boxer, the great Johnny Boxer, all the way from Florida. Hey, Johnny, I know you started which I consider probably the premier LJN Facebook page. I mean, how did that go about? I mean, did you collect LJNs as a kid? I mean, was it something that you just got into, in the past, 6 or 7 years?
Well, first of all, I want to say hello to everybody. Thank you for having me. The way I got started, I got out of the, hey, Zach, good to see you. The way I got started was a little bit different for me. I was in the service, and when I got out, I was having my oldest son, and I wanted to buy him toys, but I didn't know what to buy because whenever you went to buy toys, everything was so different. long story short, I ended up buying classic superstars. And then I got into the LJNs. I didn't know you can buy LJNs on eBay or online or anything. I thought they were lost. So I started looking around on Facebook, and I found a few guys that were doing customs at the time. This was years ago. And I still couldn't get my hands on the figures that I wanted. So I ended up creating a group. I would buy out almost all the eBay listings. There were lots that had minifigures. I would buy 10 figures just to get that one minifigure. Before you know it, I had like 500 figures, and I was buying crazy customs. I did a little bit of custom work myself. That picture that you see was a custom I made a long time ago. It's probably the third custom I ever made. And that's how I got involved. I decided to create a group because I wanted to share this with everybody. And when I made that group, believe it or not, I got a great response. Within a few months, I got like 3,000 people involved. It was great. Of course, now that you see a lot of great customizers like Jerry, Zaash, you see BD, Pete, you see a whole bunch of people taking this to a way different level that I ever thought that it would be in.
Yeah, I mean, your group is, I mean, probably it's the first one that I subscribed to, and I wanted to be in. I mean, most of these guys here on the panel, I mean, that's how I met, and I mean, and bringing on another guy that's I would consider, you know, he's a guy who wrote and created the LJN. I call it the LJN Bible, all the way from Australia, Brutus Valentine, and man. Welcome into the program. I mean, kind of tell me how you came up with that. I mean, how much research did it take to come up with this book?
I hope you can hear me okay, and it seems like we're not in delay anymore. I just whipped it up in a night there, David. You know, I had a bit of, you know, a few hours on my hands, and there you go. No, technically, the research started in about 1995. And that led to putting up an introductory website in the early days of the internet in about 1997 about what possibly was the list. And I did a bit of the socio-cultural writing at that time. And then I came back to it in about 2016 because I knew a lot more. We all knew a lot more about the collection. And so essentially the deep research started about 16, 17, 18. And then the writing, what year are we now? 21. The writing started in 2019. And that was, and then the whole book sort of come together from that. And to make it short, I was also at the same time hunting the images or finding people who could supply the images that I couldn't have myself from my own collection.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid growing, I mean, you're also in Australia, just like Zaash. I mean, was it hard to get LJNs?
I'm slightly, I think, just looking at you and looking at some of you, I'm slightly and maybe significantly older. I wasn't a child at the time. I was when wrestling broke down here. I was almost 18 years old. Kids didn't play with toys. I got Hulk Hogan like Zaash did, and like pretty much everyone did. But they were relatively very expensive as well. I was at college then. And I picked up a Mean Gene a few years later for $2 when figures were dumped. So down here, we only got about the first three series and the first part of Series 4. And some of the Aussie kid collectors had all of them, but they were hard to come by as time went on. And I didn't have hardly any of them.
And going back to Zaash, I mean, I saw you posted on your Facebook page and on your LJN group, you were working on a bendy full-size LJN. I mean, how in the hell? And I mean, that is amazing. I mean, do you have it with you? And I mean, kind of tell me and tell everybody watching and listening how you came up with that idea.
Yes. Almost. It's really connected. It's not something that's anywhere close to where I want it to be. I want this bendy to even have a movable head on it, be able to twist its head on, to be able to different directions. All I've got
I mean, exactly. I mean,
Mr. Perfect at the moment. Not the shoulders yet, but he can bend from the elbows. He can pull some different poses and stuff. You know, so the legs can go.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
that's all I've got at the moment. But he will.
I mean, that is amazing. I mean, and Nick, I see you're like a kid on Christmas. I mean, what are your thoughts on this bendy full size LJN that Zaash has come up with?
I want to know what it smells like. Does it smell like an LJN? I mean, all the LJN collectors have to know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh yeah.
There's nothing better.
It's got that rubbery smell.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
No smell.
Oh my god! What the hell? What the hell kind of vortex am I in? We're a bunch of grown men smelling wrestling figures. If my wife only knew, she'd be like, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And Johnny, I know this is a weird question, but do you ever smell your LJNs?
Hell yeah! I don't think anybody doesn't. I have plastic bins and containers full of LJN, and they smell great. Every once in a while, I hide in the closet and smell them.
Oh my! And Tyler, you're probably Tyler. I know I know you're the youngest of this group. What do you think about smelling LJNs? I mean, is that something you do in East Tennessee?
You know what? I've never tried that, but I may have to start. I mean, who knows? Why not?
I mean, and Brutus, going back to your book, which I mean, people should pick up. I mean, there's going to be a link in the show notes. I mean, what is the easiest way for someone to get that? I mean, I know you do have a distributor here in the United States, correct?
At the moment now, I've got some copies in the US that are going out direct from the US, and I've added that as a link to the website. There's only a handful left. There's another couple of boxes going over. Mail is everywhere at the moment, and for once I can say your mail is worse than our mail now. So even your local mail, it's taking the books now less time to get from Australia to the US than it is then to go from the US in most states, not all states.
Yeah,
so left and more arriving in the US, and people can still order off the site to come from Australia. But since they're in the US, much better to get them from there.
Yeah, it probably get faster from Australia to here because the mail in the US is, I mean, like a lot of things in the United States is just crap right now. But I'm sure things are a lot better in Australia than they are here currently in the United States. But I wanted to know, has anybody thought of or have they seen a customized LJN Donald Trump?
Yeah, I have.
And where did you see this? Did someone have it, or did you see pictures of it, Johnny?
Somebody had it. Somebody posted pictures. Way before he was president, somebody made a custom of him because he was inducted in the Hall of Fame. And of course, at that time, it was okay. The figure itself wasn't great.
Yeah.
The guy also made a Jesus Christ where I was like going bananas when he did that.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of custom and weird LJNs, Brutus, Nick, and Johnny, and Zaash, what is the weirdest custom LJN that someone's asked you to make or that you've made yourself?
Well, I'll go out there and I'll say someone made Jesus of Nazareth or Jesus Christ, and now I can honestly say I didn't have any words.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to know what his LJN smells like, but you know, we'll go. That's for another day, another conversation. Brutus, I mean, have you down in Australia? Has anybody approached you or said, "Hey, I got this weird LJN that I would like you to buy or make"?
Oh, well, if they approach me, they'd get just a blob of rubber that looks like crap. So Zaash will know I actually have sent a couple of people onto him. Not that I need to send him because they find him anyway, and some of the other customizers. I don't have any talent for that. Although, actually, I just realized I've got this here. This might make sense to the man on my right. I've got a bunch of LJN heads in this package that came from someone. But maybe I can do something with one day.
As Zaash, I mean, has anybody asked you to do a weird LJN custom?
Depends what you class as weird. Not really. I've been asked to do some strange sort of wrestlers that didn't really exist that I knew of, but they were obviously just sort of non-WWF sort of wrestlers. But no, not really. No, haven't really had too much.
Yeah, I mean,
Miss Elizabeth, that was utterly terrifying.
I mean, Nick, have you found going around? You know, you've been doing this show for a while and got some great episodes. And of course, it's on YouTube and soon to be on a major network. Hopefully, the old fingers crossed. What has been the weirdest LJN that you found? I mean, you found anybody that sold like a custom one that you've never seen before?
That's the one I've seen. I don't even know where it wasn't in real life. It was an image, but it was a naked Miss Elizabeth. It was awful. I hated it. Like I felt bad even looking at it. It was awful.
But you looked at it, right?
I don't know who's making it.
That is weird. I mean,
weird.
Yeah, I mean,
where do we find this figure?
I didn't find it. It wasn't for me. Honestly, I don't even know if it was real. It could have been, digitally, whatever. But that's the weirdest LJN I've seen.
It's a real figure.
Amazing, different outfits made. Amazing work. I can't do it. I can't do it at all. I can clean figures, but that's as far I can get. You know how I was talking about the smell? Well, LJNs can also absorb smells, like BO, like they stink, like they could stink out your entire collection. I came down one day and I could smell this smell, and I was like, "What is that smell?" And I sniffed. At this time, I had LJNs on the shelf here. I sniffed up and down. I was like, "What is that rank smell?" And it was Big John Studd. He reeked. He smelled. He was really nice looking, like very clean. He had absorbed this odor that was just horrific, absolutely horrific. And that was whenever I found out how to exfoliate with that Big John Studd. He's in here right now, and he smells great now. Smells almost brand new.
Boy, Tyler, this part of the show is really going off the rails. I mean, who would have thought we would be talking about the smelling of? I mean, okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. And since I have some experts on wrestling figure collecting, do any other wrestling figures have smells, or is it just the LJNs?
That's
the LJNs, isn't it?
I think LJNs are the only ones that have that unique smell.
I would love to know where this naked Miss Elizabeth. I mean, I'm not sure if it's in Tyler's collection or if it's in
that's where it's at. Yeah, I've got a confession, fellas. It's here in Tennessee. Yeah.
I mean, I will search this out if it pops up.
And I will say this: I think that's probably the most expensive prototype I've ever seen.
Oh.
I mean, it's interesting, but I mean, Johnny, I mean, I know that, see, look, folks, you need to pick up this book. I mean, I have not seen any other LJN books. I mean, the only books I'm reading are in our new book club. It's the Young Bucks, Killing the Business. And if you want to be a Von Erich, you should read Lance by Chance, which, of course, is about the fake Von Erich. But that's, that's on the Retro Wrestling Rewind reading list.
What page is that?
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, the Hulkster.
Sorry for the lack of quality there, Nick, but that's Little Nick on page.
Did you write the Christmas song?
Beg your pardon?
Did you write the 12 Days of LJN Christmas? Is that you?
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you? Nice to see you.
There you go.
I was going to do a video. I ran out of time.
That's okay. We can
funny.
do it again next year because I'll have a few books left probably. So, yeah.
I mean, Nick, if you order it now, it'll come from Australia. It'll probably be here next year because, I mean, if the government doesn't shut down, I mean, Johnny, back to you and your LJN Facebook group. I mean, when did you start that? And I mean, and how can people, I mean, can they just go to Facebook and type in your specific Facebook group? And because I mean, I want to get as many people as I can on your Facebook group. I mean, how would people go to do that?
All right, you would go into the space bar and search for groups and just type in LJN Figures and Customs, and it should be the first one there.
I mean, it's a great group. I mean, how many current subscribers do you have? I mean, you have a lot.
Current, we have over 5,000. Active members is somewhere in 4,600.
Yeah, I mean, and folks, I mean, my wife says, "Oh, you're going to go talk about wrestling figurines." I'm like, "No, we're going to be talking about wrestling figures." Figures, yes. I mean, wrestling. I mean, LJN. I mean, and I'm going to ask the whole panel. I mean, playing with LJNs now. I mean, does it bring back a lot of good memories from like your childhood? And of course, Brutus, who says he's a lot older than most of us, maybe he was in high school when he played with the wrestling figures. But I mean, did it bring back some great memories?
Well, I could answer that if Brutus doesn't.
I'll let the other guys, because I was an old man.
Hey, Johnny, did it bring back a lot of great memories? I mean, I know when I play with him today, my son, it just brings back a lot of great memories.
I'll tell you what happened to me one time. I started buying all these figures for my son. My son at the time was 2 or 3. And one time I'm driving home, I'm parking in the garage, and my wife is waiting for me at the door. And I see her face, and she looks concerned. So I asked her, what's going on? And she says, don't get angry. John went, and he started playing with your toys. And I'm like, great, no problem. So as I walk in, I noticed that my shelf was kind of empty. So he opened up, 16 figures. He opened the wrestling ring, and I just threw myself on the floor and started playing with him for like 3 hours. I can tell you that was probably the best time I had with LJNs.
Yeah, I remember going through 2 or 3 of those rings. I mean, they were. I mean, I just would, have a whole federation of wrestling figures. I mean, it just brings back some. I mean, Nick, I mean, does it bring back? I mean, when you see it, I mean, I know your show is not just about wrestling figures; it's about collecting, and you have a lot of great stuff on your show. But when you see LJNs and when you play with them, maybe with your kid, I mean, does it bring back good memories?
Instantly. That is, like you said, that is the premise of what I do. That it's not about money, because I don't have, that big, this is worth, I don't have it. I have toys that I have bit the noses off of, like the Iron Sheik, nose gone. He had a serious cage match with the Hulkster and his nose got bit off. I mean, hey, that's what happens in the world of wrestling. You know what I mean? I mean, now to see my kids play with them, I mean, only one of my children is really, there he is. I bit that nose right off, and I still have my original, the ones I had whenever I was a kid. I still have them. They're in that other room right here, sealed, and they're stuck with pins. Like I drew blood on them. I played the crap out of those toys. And now seeing my kids do that, it's unbelievable. I mean, it takes me instantly back. There was a department store here in Pittsburgh, and it was called Hills, okay? Their slogan for Hills was, it's where the toys are. Their toy department was bigger, and it was a department store. Their toy department was bigger than any other department in the entire store. Not only that, I mean, they had just as many aisles as toys as you would walk into an actual, whether it be KB, Toys R Us. The toy department was massive, and it was unbelievable. Every single time, and this is the only card at LJN I have, and his bubble, must have gotten too hot, and it pulled away. This is the only one I have. And every single time I see any LJN, I mean, I have all my posters from whenever I was a kid. I stuck them on the wall. I have them in a binder. I mean, I always was aware, even as a kid, I want to keep this for the rest of my life. I always was aware, even though it was just my toys that I played in the mud and outside with. I knew for a fact that I wanted them for the rest of my life. And every time I see one or anybody playing with one, I think of going to Hills with my mom, getting a red icy in a WWF cup, which I have in the other room. Like that instantly brings me back to that time, and it's amazing. That's why one of the reasons I love them.
I mean, I don't like kids nowadays. I mean, if you know, wrestling just seems to be a thing that can bring people together, and talking about wrestling figures and looking at LJNs or any other wrestling figures, it just brings back good memories and the good times. And I mean, I remember the only two ones I have now are Macho Man Randy Savage and the Iron Sheik, but my son knows the Iron Sheik. I say, who is this? And he goes, Iron Sheik. And it makes my heart warm that he loves it and he likes to watch wrestling with me, which my wife is not. I mean, she's more of a fan of it now because he's 5 years old. But I mean, it just brings joy and and excitement whenever my son's like, "Hey, let's play the wrestling figures." And it just. I mean, Nick, did you go through? Have you found any old rings? I mean, did you go through a lot of rings as a kid with your LJNs because they were so heavy?
Yeah, well, I used to, and I don't know if you guys did, but I used to I'd flip the ring over and I'd store them in the top. Like, where else was I going to put them? So I would flip the ring upside down and I would put all the LJNs in the top when I wasn't playing with them. And then I'd dump them out. So yeah, I did. I went through a lot of rings and a lot of cages too, sadly. Yeah.
And another question I just want to, I love, see, that's folks, that's why you need to get this, the LJN, I mean, I consider it like the Bible of LJN figures. I mean, it's got some great articles, some great pictures. I mean, of course, pick it up in the link on the show notes. But Johnny, I mean, currently right now, how many LJNs do you have?
Like cut back a little, so I probably have maybe 250 or 300 or something like that.
Oh, only 200 or 3. Oh, well. I thought I had a lot, but it's funny. Whenever all my LJNs I brought from my parents' house, like 5 or 6 years ago, like I said, they were all beat up, and I said, you know what? The only two ones that I'm going to keep are the Iron Sheik and Macho Man Savage because they were not beat up. But I mean, I just love LJNs. I mean, they're, like I said, they bring back great memories. I mean, any other kind of final words on LJNs from the group tonight?
Well, as far as LJNs, I would advise anyone, if you can get one, it'd be awesome. I love those figures. I think they're the best ones. I really don't collect any others. I collect some for my kid, but LJNs, in my opinion, is the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. And before we get out of here tonight, I mean, we'll start with Nick, and then we'll go around the room. I mean, is there anything that, like, any website, anything that you would like to, kind of depart and tell the audience watching and listening, how they can watch you on YouTube, how they can maybe get to your Facebook page, your Twitter, just, any way that people can reach out to you, starting with you, Nick.
Sure. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and we have the YouTube channel. It's just Hunting Nostalgia. You search it and that's the only thing, thankfully. It's the only name that pops up. But yeah, I work with a girl on the show. Her name is Elvira Taylor. She does the female aspect of the toys, different things, movies, TV shows, all kinds of different stuff. But yeah, I hope there is somewhere a little bit bigger you could watch it soon. I mean, the show was never intended to be a web show. I mean, that's not the last year. The show was pitched to History Channel and Netflix, and my contract actually was signed 3 days before COVID hit the U.S. It was the best timing you could imagine, but I do it because I love to do it anyway. So, and now I'm slowly getting back to where I want to be. But yep, Hunting Nostalgia on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. I'd love a subscription or follow.
Yeah, I mean,
whatever they do.
It's definitely a great show. I mean, we're going to be playing that promo again when we get to the end. Johnny, I mean, how can people reach out to you to follow you, to see what you're doing on the LJN page?
Well, right now we're working with a great, I would say customizer, but he actually creates statues. His name is Peter Rico. You can go on Facebook, LJN Figures and Customs, same as Twitter and Instagram. We should have some great things coming up.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a great page. And Zaash, welcome back. How can people, I know you also have a LJN page and you do some customs. How can people reach out and, follow you maybe on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook?
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, LJN Custom Man. Otherwise, I'm on a bunch of the groups. We've actually started a new group, LJN Elite Custom Figures. You can jump on there, have a look, and a lot of the customizers that do LJNs is on that page now. So, yeah, basically, yeah, that's where you can find me.
That's and Bruce. I mean, I mean, how can people find you? And also, of course, purchase the LJN, what I consider the LJN Bible.
Oh, thanks for that. Well, Brutus Valentine is on Facebook. That's the only way I exist in social media. And as Nick said on Instagram as the LJN Wrestling Superstars book, but he doesn't say too much. He tends to let the readers. So you follow the book, and I think Zaash he's got his before anyone in the world. Before I'd even announced that I'd even sent any out, he got his the next day, which is amazing mail. So the website, because it's the LJN Wrestling Superstars book, well, that's the website, LJNWrestlingSuperstarsBook.com. And 2 portals, one for buying internationally, we'll call it, and one for the US direct, which is dependent on how many I can get there. There's many on the way, but there's a handful left in there.
I mean, have you found a resurgence, like unlike COVID, of people wanting the book in the United States? Is that why you did that? I mean,
yeah. Originally, it was let's call it the diehards, but the people who had been aware of Brutus Valentine over a couple of years. Sounds funny saying it as a third person, but the research took a long time, and I needed to get at least 77 guys in, so there was one collector story in each profile, and then to have, I'm going to see if I'm pointing the right way, that way, the customizers in, photos of people when they were younger, although Zaash's, his didn't make it in the end because I couldn't fit it in. So, but then what tends to happen is a guy gets it finally, and they put up online. They say, "I've got this book. You've got to get that book." And that's when it's better for me to step in. It's all up to the reader. It's trying to do it. I'm not going to tell people to buy it. Well, I just told someone to buy it, didn't I? Right? But it's like if the guys are happy, it's a cliche, but this is a build it and they will come thing, which only ever works once. You can never do that twice. If the readers like it, they'll spread the word. I'm in no hurry, but it'll be good to sell a few more. But I've sold plenty, but a few more would be good. And, it's like spread the word if you like it. And if you don't, well, I can't help you there because it's a long way to send it back.
Yeah, if you return it, it's going to take a long time to get there. But finally, to end the broadcast, Tyler Peters, how can people watch you, listen to you, and read your amazing work?
That's very kind of you, David. And just whatthebuzz.com. It's really called The Buzz as well. Just I'm doing a lot of wrestling kind of news type things. So it's been interesting and very fortunate enough to do that. And thank you all for having me on this program. I've learned a lot. I did play with figures, got to admit, didn't actually have the opportunity to play with the LGN. But now I may want to look into collecting them because very fascinated. That's why just sit back because I'm learning so much knowledge from you all, and it's been a very great conversation. So thank you all for letting me stick around. So,
I mean, what can I say? I mean, for the great Johnny Boxer, of course, the great Brutus Valentine, and the great Zaash Man, and you cannot ever forget hunting nostalgia with the great Nick Bartley, who may have a couple of different voices that he will debut. A little Boris and Bart. How would you like to take it out of the program with some Boris and Bart, sir?
Well, I mean, I can't. What is funny is the casting director that found me, the first sentence out of her mouth to me was, "Hello, we're not interested in Boris and Bart." It's just that's what it's the first thing she said. But Boris and Bart was 2 moron characters that I created literally to get anyone who's scrolling through any social media just to stop and listen to me talk about toys for 2 minutes. How about I do a JYD real quick and then I'll end it with Boris and Bart? How's that? Is that good?
That sounds great.
All right. Let me tell you something there, brother man. I am the JYD. Oh, let me tell you, I am the king of the WWF. That's right, sucker, the JYD.
One of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Absolutely love the JYD. And I used to shave this half of my face, slick it back. I was two different characters. This side I was one character. This side I was another character. And I would say, it's Boris and Bart with this super short retro toy report. And I would talk about wrestling toys or whatever different toys just long enough to get somebody to say, what is this idiot doing?
Hey,
and it worked. It worked. So
can Boris and Bart say, we will talk to you in the past and see you next week?
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll talk to you in the past and we will see you next week. That is very right.
38 pounds in the black corner. From St. Louis, Missouri.
Andre the Giant.
Gonna get his leg set on the loser.
Number 1, the greatest WWE champion of all time, and in many ways, the man who made the title what it is today, Bruno Sammartino.
His opponent weighing 236 pounds in the white corner. From Valentine, California.